Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Technical Thursday. I'm Fred Delivert, the winemaker for Tolosa Winery. Our goal with Technical Thursday is to bring you behind the scene of the wine production at the winery. And we're going to dive into that today for sure. On our segment, we always have a guest. No exception today. My guest is a man wearing many hats. He's our Chief Production Officer. He's the General Manager and winemaker for Phase 2 Cellars, Josh Baker. Hi, Josh.
Hello, thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming.
Yeah.
Long drive, right? So the topic of the day is bottling, and it's just pure coincidence, but we are bottling this Thursday, so we're gonna dive into that. You know, it happens 3 times per year at Tolosa, once in March, once in May, and once in July. But you might not be familiar with Tolosa, so let's have a few words about who we are first. You know, we are located in San Luis Obispo, Central Coast, California. We're in the south part of the town, in the beautiful Edna Valley. Edna Valley is a transverse valley, meaning it's running from the northwest to the southeast with a wide opening on Morro Bay onto the ocean. And that opening onto the ocean is kind of what's regulate the whole climate we have here. You know, in winter we have a very mild winter, very mild temps because the ocean is close. And in summer we have the marine layer coming in, we have the marine breeze in the afternoon. So we have a very mild summer as well. So because of that, we totally qualify as a cool climate grapes growing region. And there's nothing that thrives better in cool climate than Pinot Noir and Chardonnay, and that's what we're specializing in. Something you probably don't know about Tolosa, under the same roof, there's 2 wineries actually, Tolosa and Phase 2. But for that, I'm gonna turn to Josh, and he's gonna tell us more about the whole process.
Right, so like Fred says, Phase 2 Cellars is really the umbrella under which Tolosa sits. And so there's kind of 2 pieces to our business. There's the Tolosa brand, but then there's also a custom crush business, and that's what we refer to as Phase 2 Cellars. So on the Phase 2 side, we do work for clients who either may not have their own winery, or just due to geography, they source the fruit from here, but they want to make the wine down here instead of trucking it to their main facility up north, or whatever the case may be. So that's our business. We've got 5 to 6 good-sized clients that range anywhere from about 20 tons up to about 2,000 tons. So the Phase 2 side of the business is a little bit bigger in terms of production, and a little bit larger in scale in terms of the size of the lots than we're used to with Tolosa. So it's interesting, and it's it's
Different scale.
It's different scale, but it's great to have both in the same building and kind of be able to build off of the techniques and the practices that are utilized for the Tolosa side, and then try and incorporate those as best we can into the larger side as well.
So definitely, I think the difference of scale is what strikes me the most. Now, Josh, maybe people are curious about how did you end up in the wine industry running a large winery? Can you tell us more about that?
I don't know how it happened. No, really. So I guess just the long and the short of it is, when I was back in college forever ago now, I had a friend who was about 2 years older than me. He graduated. He had a biology degree. He got out of school and into the wine business. I wasn't quite sure what I was going to do, so I followed in his footsteps, got a biology degree, got out of school. By that point, I was drinking a lot of wine because he was in the industry. All of a sudden, it was cheaper than beer. And so by the time I was a senior and looking to graduate, I was really into it, and really, really wanted to get further into the industry. So I started my career at a large winery in Modesto, actually. I won't say the name, but it's very large scale, and worked as a microbiologist there. Had a chance to filter into the cellar, onto the production side, and do some special projects with them. Did well doing that. Got promoted to be a supervisor in the cellar, so now moving on to the production side where the wine's actually being made. And that was super interesting, and I really liked it. But what I really wanted to do was learn how to make wine. At a winery that scale, it's interesting. There's a production track and there's a winemaking track, and strangely enough, they don't cross. So I wanted to jump sides of the track and end up on the winemaking side. So I made the decision to come down to the Edna Valley here in 2003. Started as cellar master at a neighboring winery right across the valley from Tolosa. and worked my way up to head winemaker there. I left there in 2013, and I came to Tolosa Phase 2. It was a great transition, actually, because when I was at the other winery, we were a client of the Phase 2 side of the business. And so I knew the ownership, I knew the people, I knew the guys on the floor, great relationships, great people. We always really liked doing work here. So it was a great opportunity to come over and kind of continue to build on what was already in place at Phase 2. And here I am.
Here you are. Here you are today on Technical Thursday at Tolosa. So the topic of the day is bottling. And you can see all around us, we are bottling, right? So something you guys need to know, we don't own our own bottling line. You can see behind me, we actually contract with a company that brings a line to us, not only the line, but also the crew to run the line, all the pieces of equipment. I think with Josh, something interesting is to talk about the pros and cons of not having our own bottling line.
Yeah. I mean, from a management perspective, we've gone round and round a number of times trying to evaluate what it looks like to potentially have a full-time bottling line on site, meaning a static line, not a mobile truck. And really, what it always comes down to is, in order to make that pencil out financially, you need to be in a situation where you're running that line all the time. You mentioned how Tolosa bottles basically 3 times a year, relatively small runs, super high quality. So, even though we're going slow and we're being careful, it's just not enough bottling to make sense financially. And so for that reason, we contract and go the third-party route. It's very popular. There are a number of these trucks out and available. And it works out well for us. We've got great relationships with these third-party bottling vendors, and we can kind of schedule based on Tolosa's need, get the truck when we need it, and have our staff free to do cellar work when we're not bottling, and kind of transition into doing some bottling work when we need to. So it makes a lot more sense for us just given the scale.
It does. I would just add one thing on the pros. I think the best thing that bring having your own bottling is, like, if there's a problem.
Yeah.
If there's a problem, you can handle that problem. You have the flexibility of cutting off the run, and okay, the glass is in a boat. The glass is coming in 2 weeks. Okay, we're gonna bottle in 2 weeks. There's no problem.
Yeah.
With that kind of contract, well, it's a little bit more finicky. We need to move. There's way more things to move around to be able to bottle. But
it definitely using a mobile bottler definitely adds a layer of pressure. Because, as you say, you don't have that flexibility. If you can't get the bottles in time, if something goes wrong with your cork order, you don't always have that flexibility to either move the schedule around or just postpone for a week and a half until you get your shipment in. So that adds a level of stress. I guess that's probably the biggest downside.
So you just talk about stress. Guys, if you run into winemakers, ask them, how do you feel about bottling? And I guarantee you, the most common answer you're gonna get is gonna be, I hate bottling. So, bottling generates anxiety, stress. Do you hate bottling? You're a winemaker.
Yeah, I think the answer is yes and no. I do hate it to some degree. There's a lot of pressure. Aside from what can go wrong, it's just one of those situations where you've really got to have your ducks in a row. Yep. You've got to be super tight on quantities and delivery timing, and the cased goods moving out of the facility. So there's just a ton of moving pieces that all have to fall into line. And it's great as long as you have your bases covered and there's no problems. If that's the case, I love it, right? Especially from a winemaker's perspective, I like it, right? Because it's kind of akin to raising a child and then having them grow up and find a partner they really love and get a great job and buy a house and start a family, right? So it's kind of the release into the real world, and all your hard work is paid off. So on that side of the coin, I love it, but it can be stressful.
It is. Yeah, I totally concur with Josh. I don't hate it myself. I deal with it. It's okay. A lot of moving parts to put together, which is kind of exciting sometimes too. I mean, I feel good when everything is lined up actually. But that being said, hey, it's long hours. We need to get, we got here at 5:30 this morning. On a regular day, we would be here at 6 and probably leave the winery around 5. So that's long hours. And let's be honest, it's just boring. It's not fun. If everything runs well, and we all want that, it's just very repetitive. So you're like, okay, well, it's boring. And it's just an assembly line running in front of you. And then when something goes wrong, you're like, oh no, it's wrong. Like I'm losing time. That's not good. So yeah, so that's the story about bottling. I think at that point, we should go in the beast, in the tummy of the beast, and
get
check
in
that.
there and see what's going on.
I'm in kind of the mouth of the bottling truck. Imagine it's pretty simple. It's a track. It's a track that just feeds different pieces of equipment, and each piece of equipment has a role. So I'm just gonna jump in and show you step by step what's happening in the truck. So here we're gonna be dumping glass, right? And we're just gonna follow that glass through every step it goes through. So just for the shooting purpose, we reduce the speed at the minimum. Usually we're about 72 bottles a minute, and here it's like snail speed. So here the bottles are coming, they're gonna get sparge. It's an inert gas filling the bottle to reduce the contact between oxygen and wine, because oxygen is an enemy of the wine. That part of the truck is the filler with a bowl full of wine, and you have spouts. Your bottles are gonna go against the spouts, it's gonna seal, the wine's gonna drop in the bottle. And as I said, that's super slow, guys. Usually it's about 70 bottles a minute, I think. Then we're gonna reach the next piece of equipment, which is the corker. Before the corker, we have the leveler, that little plunger. It's gonna adjust the level of each bottle to make sure we have consistency there. Corker, the cork is in. There's actually a vacuum pull between that headspace between the cork and the wine. And then, it's kind of a trip, right? The bottles are continuing their road trip on the track. They're gonna get a foil or a capsule. Thank you, Paul. And from there, Josh gonna take over.
Yeah. So, Paul, you're doing a masterful job. Thank you. So you kind of start with one of these guys, and so it's nice and fat, not crimped down. But we want it to look like this. So they get hand applicated here, and then they move into this machine. So this is kind of a crimping machine. So it's a foil spinner, is what we call it. So you can see those heads that spin up there. The foils go in loose, and then they get spun down by this machine. So when they come out this other side, it's gonna look a lot more like you're used to seeing on your wine bottle. So coming out of that machine, it's gonna come into the labeler. So you've got all kinds of really cool engineering here to make sure that everything stays well in line and the machine doesn't get ahead of itself. So we go through this roller, it kind of separates out the bottles, keeps everything nice and parted out, and down into the labeler. So you can see the labels that are spooled out here. All kinds of legalities in play when it comes to labels. So tips on where the wine's from, and then of course what kind of wine it is. Is it Chardonnay? Is it Pinot Noir? Is it Syrah? Whatever the case may be. So labels get spun off of these here. They come down, and as the bottles go through, this has actually got a vacuum behind it, so you can see that the labels kind of stick to the belt. They get applied to the bottle and just kind of spun around. And then the bottles make their way around this side of the horseshoe. And then really, they're off for a QC check and then to get packed in the case boxes. So for us, that's either in 6-pack boxes or 12-pack boxes. And there's a crew who's taking a look at each and every bottle as we move along, making sure that the labels look right, making sure the label is on straight, the capsules look good, and the fill height is correct. Once that's done, they go into the box, they get taped up on top, roll on down, get packed on a pallet, and then it's off to storage where they stay nice and cool until. If you have any questions or anything, don't hesitate to hit us up on Facebook or otherwise. Don't forget to call the winery if you're interested in purchasing any wine, and visit tolosawinery.com and check us out. Thanks for joining us today, and take care.